For decades, Mexico has been controlled by drug cartels. These giant criminal gangs only became more powerful as time passed. They're all known for shipping huge quantities of any kind of drug you can think of, but that's far from being their only crime. The world of drug trafficking involves murder, kidnapping, and bribery. But in recent years, the landscape has been shifting. The infamous powerful leaders of prominent cartels are, one by one, being killed, imprisoned, faking their own deaths, or completely disappearing. The loss of these leaders is almost never simple, and it can create serious tensions within the cartel. With this happening so frequently, the power vacuums created are leading to an emergence of new cartels that break off from the ones that used to be powerful. And that's how CJNG was formed. But who are they? And more importantly, how have they made such a huge mark on the criminal landscape in Mexico? Let's find out. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, better known as CJNG, first emerged after a major event in the history of the infamous Sinaloa cartel. When one prominent member of the Sinaloa gang was captured and another murdered, this caused a fracturing that spread outside of the cartel. One of the groups affected was Milenio Cartel, who had once been loyal to the Sinaloa cartel. The Milenio group split up into many factions, but there were only two that made a mark. One was La Resistencia, who briefly formed an alliance with Los Zetas, a cartel widely considered among the top 5 most violent cartels that have ever operated. The other, of course, was CJNG. The two cartels that had split from the same gang began a turf war for control of the Jalisco region of Mexico. But that wasn't the only way CJNG was making themselves known. In 2009, they made a grand debut. Videos of interrogations began to appear online. These interrogations were conducted by CJNG members still operating under the cartel's original name, Los Mata Zetas, which translates to the Zeta Killers. They made it clear that they had dedicated themselves to killing members of the Zeta and Gulf cartels. The interrogations in the videos were surprisingly successful. Their captives confessed all their crimes and even gave out the names of police commanders and politicians who were offering them protection. Not long after the videos emerged, the bodies of 3 men were found inside a truck, with a note from CJNG saying they were dedicated to cleaning up Mexico. Just a few days later, a government agency received an anonymous call saying members of Los Zetas were about to be kidnapped and eliminated. The CJNG had made sure everyone knew their name. That was in 2009, but by 2011, the CJNG had expanded their ideas. They'd already made their mark and now declared war not just against the Los Zetas and Gulf cartels, but against every cartel in Mexico. It was a bold claim, but it didn't last. They were offered a new alliance by their old allies, the Sinaloa cartel. The Sinaloa cartel was determined to keep Los Zetas at bay in the Jalisco region, just like CJNG, so they accepted and joined forces. That was when the mass killing started. At about 5 p.m. one day in September, several vehicles coordinated to stop traffic on a major road in Veracruz. Once the traffic came to a standstill, armed men climbed out of 2 trucks and pointed their guns at the drivers now stuck in the traffic jam. As the shocked drivers watched, some of the men opened the backs of the trucks and began pulling the cargo inside out onto the road. The drivers were horrified. The backs of the trucks were piled high with tortured corpses that were now being thrown onto the open road in full view. In total, there were 35 murder victims, many of which had been visibly tortured to death and still had their hands tied together. Once all the bodies had been dumped, the armed men took off on foot, abandoning the trucks with only a written note as an explanation. The note said that these people were murdered by a group that opposed extortion and the murder of innocent people. It also threatened anyone that offered help to Los Zetas. The note was signed by another group working with the Sinaloa cartel, but CJNG later claimed responsibility. However, when the police investigated, they discovered that none of the people whose bodies had been dumped were involved in organized crime. Even though the note left at the scene said they were against the murder of innocents, all the men dumped on the highway were ordinary civilians. This horrific incident was only the start of what became the Veracruz massacres. A few days later, more bodies started appearing. The Navy were the first to discover 20 corpses hidden in an ordinary residential home. Further searches led to the discovery of 11 more bodies in another house and 1 body hidden in a third house. 4 more bodies were discovered later. The day after this gruesome discovery, the State Justice Attorney General stepped down. It was probably a good decision because as he was resigning, the CJNG were involved in another 67 murders in Veracruz. Following that, 10 corpses were discovered the very next day, scattered around the city, while 8 more bodies were found inside a car. The federal government immediately launched an operation that was intended to keep Veracruz safe by installing a strong military presence. They hoped to win back the territory from the warring cartels, but the killings didn't stop. In early December, cartels attacked 3 public buses heading into the city, leaving 16 people dead, including 3 Americans. The authorities went to find those responsible and killed 5 gunmen in the operation. Just a few days later, a citizen informed police that more bodies had been discovered. This time, the 10 murder victims had been handcuffed, tortured, decapitated, and dumped on a dirt road. Soon after, 13 more bodies were found in an 18-wheeler truck, and a further 15 bodies were unearthed from a mass grave. And this wasn't only happening in Veracruz. For every murder committed by CJNG, more revenge killings were happening. The Los Zetas and Milenio cartels were murdering people and dumping them in public to send a message. According to police, many of those murdered were not involved with the cartels as their murderers claimed. The bodies of cooks, store owners, and even innocent teenagers were discovered among those killed and tortured. Several journalists were also murdered by cartels. It was clear that CJNG meant business, and the war between them and the Los Zetas cartel was becoming increasingly bloody. As the murder rates in Veracruz dropped when military presence became stronger, the violence simply spread to other parts of the country. And it was about to get worse. In 2012, the CJNG posted another video online. This time they were declaring war against the Knights Templar cartel. They claimed they were joining forces with civilians to put an end to crime committed against innocent people. Soon after, bodies started appearing around Michoacan, marked with a CJNG signature. This violent warfare continued for years and continued to escalate. In December 2018, at 7:30 a.m., 2 grenades were thrown at the American consulate building in Mexico. Incredibly, there was nobody in the building at the time, so the bombing did not lead to any injuries. Debates began about whether this crime was committed by CJNG or by a rival gang attempting to damage their reputation. But it was a sign of a bigger problem. Fighting was starting to break out within the CJNG. Several members broke away from them and formed new cartels. Meanwhile, authorities were closing in. They took down several prominent members of the cartel, including an infamous female assassin who was thought to be one of the regional leaders of the CJNG. They had also tracked down some of the people involved in the cartel's finances and were shutting down several major bank accounts and trusts associated with the cartel. But all this wasn't enough to put a stop to them. Today, they're still not only in operation, but they're surprisingly powerful. While it doesn't control all the territory it operates in, CJNG is in control of several large areas of Mexico. They're still producing and shipping cocaine and other drugs with contacts in Colombia, the US, Canada, Australia, China, and other smaller countries around the world. Their operation is shockingly successful. They're currently the second most powerful cartel in Mexico, with over 100 drug labs scattered across the country. Considering the street value of the drugs they're shipping, estimates state that the cartel is earning a mind-blowing $8.1 billion from cocaine sales and another $4.6 billion from crystal meth every year. They're also considered the most dangerous criminal organization in Mexico by the government. The cartel claims they're against crimes that affect civilians, but there's no doubt that kidnapping, human trafficking, and other violent crimes against innocents have spiked in regions where they operate. They've been known to use propaganda to get the public on their side, such as distributing toys to children in areas where they've taken control. They're effectively using police and government corruption to their advantage, but not only with bribery. During the 2018 elections, the CJNG killed an unbelievable 130 political candidates in just 1 year. Considering how many high-ranking officials they've murdered without any repercussions, it won't surprise you to learn that they're responsible for the deaths of thousands of civilians, despite claiming they're fighting to end cartel violence against innocents. Currently, they've returned to being an enemy to the Sinaloa cartel, who still hold the top spot for most powerful cartel in Mexico. But the CJNG is advancing. As they expand, they're becoming increasingly terrifying. One report from 2017 even revealed the horrific recruitment techniques. According to these reports, the new recruits are trained by being forced to kidnap, torture, and murder victims before eating their flesh. These recruits who are made to commit these terrible crimes are often teenagers and can even be as young as only 12 years old. The cartel uses this method to create murderers who feel no remorse for their crimes. It's clear this vicious cartel is a dangerous force in Mexico. As the non-corrupt authorities fight an uphill battle to end their reign of terror, they only get stronger. We can only wait and watch to see what they'll do next. So, let us know your thoughts in the comment section, and before you leave, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Criminal Corner so you don't miss the next ones.